Over the last number of months, certainly the last year and a half, if you've been paying attention to the media, you've probably heard a lot about pipelines. Now, much of what you've heard is probably about a pipeline to the United States, the Keystone Pipeline. It was a big deal in last year's presidential election. You've probably also heard about issues like the Gateway Pipeline, which proposes to take Alberta oil to the West Coast, and now the new Energy East Pipeline, which proposes to take energy to the East Coast. What you may have is questions, and what you may be seeking is answers. The truth is that pipelines have a long history in Canada. In fact, the first oil pipeline in North America was built in Ontario. That's right, the province of Ontario, way back in 1862. It's older than the country itself. And the first energy pipeline was built in Quebec even earlier than that. So pipelines have a long history in Canada, a long history in Ontario, a long history in serving North America. And two Canadian companies, Enbridge and TransCanada, are amongst the biggest energy pipeline companies in North America. They have outstanding records. You may not be aware of that. Over the last number of years, 99.99%, over the last decade, I should say, 99.99%, in excess of that actually, of all fluid that's gone into an energy pipeline has came out the other end as intended, without incident. You're talking about pipelines that are flowing millions, 3 million barrels of oil each and every day, providing energy for North American consumers. What you may not know, and what I have an awful lot of Canadians ask me each and every day, is why don't we burn Canadian oil? Why don't we have access to gasoline that's made with Canadian oil? Well, it's because most of our Western energy has no means of accessing the Canadian market, which is why lately you've likely heard about projects like Enbridge's Line 9. Line 9 was a pipeline that was built in the 1970s, completed in the 1970s. It belongs to Enbridge. It was always meant to flow energy, oil, from Alberta's oil reserves, conventional oil at the time, and to flow that oil through to Montreal. So entering at Sarnia from the United States, flowing through Ontario and into its terminus at Montreal. That was to provide access to Canadian oil for Canadian refineries to produce gasoline that could be burnt by Canadians, but also sold to international markets. And now they're looking at, once again, for the last number of years, what you may not be aware is that Line 9 was reversed. So rather than flowing west to east as it was intended, it's flown east to west. So oil has actually came in from places like the North Sea. And Canadians, specifically people in Ontario, Quebec, the East Coast, oil that's been refined in central Canada and sold as gasoline products, diesel products, other products that we buy each and every day, is actually oil that's produced in foreign markets and sold to us at a significant premium, what's known as Brent crude prices, whereas Canadian oil, Western oil, sells at a significant discount, or often West Texas pricing, but in reality, because Canadian oil really only has one market, which is the United States, it often sells at a discount to West Texas. So by reversing Line 9, we'd actually provide what an awful lot of people in Ontario, an awful lot of people in Eastern Canada ask me about all the time. We'd provide the opportunity for Canadians, Ontarians, people in Quebec, to actually refine Western oil, and for Canadians, people in Ontario and Quebec, to actually burn gasoline that's made from Canadian oil. The Energy East Pipeline, which is a TransCanada pipeline, a $12 billion project, which was recently announced by TransCanada, runs across northern Ontario into Quebec and then has a terminus in St. John, New Brunswick. This new pipeline, as I indicated, it's a $12 billion project, would allow for Western oil to be able to access not just Canadian markets and to be refined for Canadian consumers in the Maritimes and right across Canada, would also provide for global access. I talked earlier about how Canadian oil produced in Alberta really only has one market, the United States, which makes us in some ways hostage to that market. We're not independent in terms of how we market Canadian energy. But by getting it to the East Coast or the West Coast or both, we actually open up the opportunity for Canadian oil and Canadian energy to be sold globally, and for more Canadian jobs to be created, and for the wealth of Canadian energy to be better spread right across the province, right across all the provinces and right across the country. One of the questions that came up recently from the province of Ontario is they wanted to know what's in it for Ontario. What's the benefit to Ontario if the Energy East pipeline is built? Well, last year, Canadian pipeline companies paid almost $1 billion in corporate and property taxes alone. $1 billion in taxes just from the pipeline companies. On top of that, we have to keep in mind that in excess of 20% of the Toronto Stock Exchange is Canadian energy companies, including the pipelines. So does Toronto have a benefit? Absolutely. Does the province of Ontario have a benefit? Absolutely. And that's not even speaking of the direct jobs that are provided as a result of the activities that will occur here in Ontario, or the access to lower priced Canadian oil to be produced for Canadian consumers, which should lead to lower prices at the pumps. The bottom line is we all win if we can unlock and open up an opportunity for Canadian resources to be available right across the country. This is a question of national importance. It's something that matters to each and every Canadian. It's something that you need to know about. It's something that you need to, frankly, when you hear some of the facts that may get thrown around in the media, that you actually need to understand what is the track record of the Canadian pipeline companies. What are the regulations that actually govern it? Canada has some of the most stringent regulations of any country in the world when it comes to the transportation of bulk oil or bulk energy through pipelines. And our pipeline companies have an outstanding record, as I indicated earlier, 99.99, in excess of 99.99% delivery rate over the last decade. When you know the facts, you're empowered. What matters as Canadians is that we seize the opportunity. It's important, not just for this generation, but for future generations, that we continue to build a strong Canada. A strong Canada means that we take advantage of all of our opportunities, whether that's conventional energy, renewable energy, and we look forward and continue to invest into science, into the best technology, the best methods, and then in every way, we seek to be a world leader.